I believe that every data analyst needs to understand Gestalt data visualization principles. Those are guiding principles for how our brain interprets visually presented data. So if you follow those principles, you can make it a lot easier for your audience to understand what you are communicating through data. On the other hand, if you're not following those principles, then your data visualization becomes confusing and your message gets lost in communication. I first came across those principles in a book called Storytelling Through Data, and I can tell you it really changed how I'm approaching my data visualization projects in Power BI or Tableau. So let me explain those in more detail. So today I will cover 7 core data visualization principles. I will show you practical examples of how those principles are applied. And we will also look at some examples where those principles are not followed, so you will really see how not following those principles affects the clarity of your communication through data. The first principle is proximity. It basically tells us that elements that are close together are perceived as a group. And the first practical application of this principle is grouping your bar charts into clusters, as you can see on the screen. So if you compare the graph to the left with the graph to the right, you can really see the difference in the clarity of communication. So introducing those gaps between product 1, 2, and 3, it's like introducing pauses when you speak. It just introduces clarity. So before you make your next point, you make a pause, so your audience has time to understand what you are saying, and then you're moving on to another point. So this is the first practical application of the proximity data visualization principle. Another practical application is putting the elements on your page close together. In this example, you can see that at the top we have the cards that summarize the metrics that are presented below in the chart. By putting those elements together, we are kind of forming words into sentences, if you like that analogy. So each chart is a word, and together they make a sentence. The next principle that we're going to discuss is similarity. And on the left, you can see an example of data visualization that violates this principle. So it's presenting product A in dark blue in the line chart, and it's presenting the same product in green in the bar chart. So this violates the principle of similarity. And when your audience looks at this chart, they cannot immediately understand that you are talking about the same product in those 2 different charts. However, when you look at the graph on the right, this principle is followed. So we are making it a lot easier for your audience to understand your points. We're teaching them to associate this color with product A. And that's what making it easier for them to understand what you're presenting in your data visualization. Another practical application of this is building the same layout for your data visualization reports. For example, on this screen you can see 2 pages of the same reports, and you can see that the cards, the vertical bar charts, the filters, the horizontal bar charts, they are placed in a consistent layout. So we're basically teaching our audience to get used to this layout. So when they open the new page, they don't have to spend time to figure out where is what. They will immediately know how to read the new page, even if they open it for the first time. So the next principle is the principle of continuity, and it tells us that if we connect something with a line, then we assume there is a sequential relationship between the connected elements. And the clearest example of this data visualization principle is a line chart. This is why line chart is universally accepted as the best data visualization type for trends. So on the left you can see an example where this principle is followed. The months are basically sorted in an ascending order by their order throughout the year. However, a lot of beginner data analysts don't do this, so they just sort months in descending order, like starting from the highest by their metric and going all the way down to the lowest. This is what you can see on top right. And essentially the use of the line chart implies a sequential relationship in your categories. And when you're breaking this sequential relationship, it's becoming confusing to your users. Another example where this principle is violated is using line charts for categorical data. So on bottom right you can see the breakdown of new hires by business unit, and there is no reason to present this data in a trend chart because there is no sequential relationship between your categories. So again, the data visualization that is used here is assuming this relationship, but in reality there isn't one. So this is basically confusing our audience. Now, the next data visualization principle is the principle of closure. It tells us that a set of individual elements are perceived as a single object when there is a recognizable shape. And a really clear practical application of this is when you're using dashed lines for your trend charts. So as you can see, our brain perceives those dashed lines as a single line. Well, primarily it's a single line in our brain, and only after we perceive it as a single line we can see that it's a lot of different smaller objects placed together. On the other hand, the closure principle tells us that some formatting elements are not really needed. For example, the background color or the borders around your data visualization. So those kind of introduce noise and they basically take the mental space for us to process. By looking at the right chart, even though the chart has a lot of different elements, the line, the x-axis, the title, it is primarily perceived as a single object. So even without the background, even without the borders, our brain has already scanned this and has recognized this as a single object. This basically means that all those extra elements are not really necessary. So the next principle is the principle of enclosure, and enclosure means grouping a lot of smaller objects together to demonstrate that they are a part of a whole. And this is what you can see in this example, where we introduce the background color to group the forecast data, and the actual data is visualized without the background color. So this is immediately telling our audience that we are showing two different things. Those two things that we are showing in the same graph are not the same. You can do enclosure through background color. You can also do it through different shapes or borders. Another way to do enclosure is by introducing those dashed lines. So in this example, we are dividing our scatter plot into 4 quadrants. So our brain is perceiving this as 4 different quadrants and is grouping those dots into quadrants because of the dashed lines that we've introduced. Now the next principle is the principle of symmetry, and it's basically telling us that when objects are symmetrically placed, our brain scans and makes sense of them a lot quicker. This principle basically highlights the importance of alignment in your data visualization report. If your visuals are not aligned, if they don't have like an equal gap between them, then it makes it more difficult for your audience to read the report. So please do not neglect the importance of aligning everything symmetrically. Now, the final principle is the principle of figure and ground, and it's basically telling us that our brain is quite good at distinguishing the background objects from the foreground objects, and this way we can use the background objects to give more context to the foreground objects. So in this case, for example, we are visualizing the European countries on a scatter plot, and by having the rest of the world basically in light gray on the background, we're giving more context. We are telling the audience where the European countries are sitting as compared to the rest of the world. So another good example is by drawing a line through your scatter plot. So our brain immediately recognizes that the line is the main or the foreground element, and all the dots on the scatter plot are the background elements. So they just give more context to us basically about the distribution. So this was everything that I have for you today about the data visualization principles. There are a lot more topics about data visualizations, like selecting the right graph for your data visualization, or creating the layout for your data visualization reports. I share more guidance on principles like that on our website, and I'm planning to make more YouTube videos about those in the future. So for now you can read more about those principles on our website, and in the future I will make more YouTube videos so I can explain those in more detail. I hope you liked this video, and yeah, stay tuned for another one.